If you rely on apples to feed you through winter, this matters. Some fruit trees survive harder frost, store longer without special care, and keep feeding you when apples fail. By the end of this video, you'll know which ones still work when conditions turn against you. For most people, apples feel like the perfect fruit. They grow almost everywhere, they store well, and they're deeply tied to how we imagine orchards should work. Over time, that familiarity turned into a belief that apples are the most reliable fruit tree for any cold climate. But that belief wasn't shaped by survival or resilience. It was shaped by commercial farming, uniform harvests, and systems designed to work only when everything goes right. In this video, we're going to challenge that assumption. You'll see why apples became the default, why that doesn't always make them the best choice, and which fruit trees quietly outperform them in real conditions. I'll show you 5 fruit trees that survive harder frost, store naturally through winter, and keep feeding you with far less attention. These aren't perfect fruits, they're reliable ones. Apples are often damaged not by extreme cold, but by timing. Late spring frosts can wipe out blossoms overnight. Early cold snaps can ruin fruit before it's ready. Many apple varieties need a narrow window of conditions to succeed. When the weather shifts unexpectedly, apples don't adapt. They fail quietly, leaving you with a healthy-looking tree and nothing to harvest at the end of the season. Most apple trees also demand protection. Fungal diseases, insects, and rot become serious problems without regular spraying and pruning. In managed orchards, this is normal. In a low-effort garden, it becomes a weakness. Apples don't forgive neglect. When attention drops, yields follow. That's not a flaw in the tree. It's a mismatch between the plant and the conditions most home growers actually live with. To keep apples productive, you need yearly pruning, thinning, pest control, and careful timing. Skip one season, and the tree often responds with poor fruit or disease. This creates a hidden cost. Apples work well when someone is always watching. But gardens don't always get that level of attention. Illness, work, weather, and fatigue all interfere. A survival fruit has to tolerate those gaps. Apples are famous for storage, but that reputation assumes ideal conditions. Correct temperature, humidity, airflow, and variety selection all matter. Without a proper cellar or controlled space, apples rot faster than expected. Many people lose half their stored harvest by midwinter. A fruit that claims to store well but requires precision isn't truly resilient. It's dependent on infrastructure most people don't have. High yields create a dangerous illusion. When apples produce heavily, it feels like proof they're the best choice. But productivity in good years hides fragility in bad ones. Reliable food systems aren't judged by their best seasons. They're judged by what happens when conditions slip. Frost, neglect, missed pruning, or storage mistakes reveal which plants are truly dependable and which ones only perform when managed carefully. If the goal is food security, the question changes. Instead of asking which fruit produces the most, we ask which one survives the most. Which trees tolerate cold without losing the crop? Which fruits improve after harvest instead of spoiling? Which plants continue feeding you even when attention drops? That shift in thinking exposes why apples aren't always the strongest option for cold climates. Every tree in this video passes 3 tests. First, it survives hard frost without losing the harvest. Second, it stores naturally through winter, often improving with time. Third, it keeps feeding you with minimal effort and tolerance for neglect. These traits don't matter much in commercial orchards, but in real gardens, they decide whether food is there when you need it most. Once you understand those criteria, a different group of fruit trees comes into focus. Trees that don't rush ripening, fruits that wait instead of spoiling, plants that treat cold as part of the process, not a threat. From this point on, we'll look at 5 fruit trees that quietly outperform apples in frost, storage, and reliability, starting with one that many people already grow without realizing its full potential. When people think of cold, hardy fruit, pears are often overlooked. They feel familiar, ordinary, and less exciting than apples. But that's exactly why they matter. European pears have quietly proven themselves across cold regions for centuries. They tolerate frost better, demand less intervention, and respond more predictably to neglect. In many climates, pears don't just survive where apples struggle. They remain productive when conditions stop being ideal. European pear trees handle cold differently than apples. Their blossoms tolerate lower temperatures, and their growth cycle is less sensitive to brief weather swings. Late frosts still cause damage, but far less often wipe out the entire crop. Pears don't require a narrow window of perfect conditions. They accept irregular seasons. That flexibility is one of the reasons pears were a staple fruit long before modern orchard management existed. Unlike apples, pears are not meant to be eaten straight from the tree. They're harvested firm and finished off tree. This changes everything. Cold doesn't ruin pears. Time improves them. Their sugars develop slowly during storage, turning patience into flavor. A fruit that ripens after harvest is far safer than one that must be eaten at exactly the right moment. Pears are designed to wait. Stored correctly, many pear varieties last 3 to 6 months without advanced infrastructure. A simple cellar, cool garage, or unheated basement is often enough. Because pears ripen gradually, you don't face sudden waves of spoilage. You remove what you need when you need it. This makes pears far more forgiving than apples, which often rot unpredictably once storage conditions drift even slightly off balance. Pear trees demand far less precision than apples. Pruning is simpler. Pest pressure is lower. Disease issues are less aggressive in many regions. Missing a season of care doesn't punish the tree as harshly. Pears are not maintenance-free, but they tolerate inconsistency. That matters in real life. Gardens fail not because people don't care, but because attention isn't always available when plants demand it. When apple trees fail, it's often all at once. A frost wipes blossoms. A disease spreads fast. Storage collapses quickly. Pears fail more slowly. Problems tend to be partial, not total. You may lose some fruit, but rarely everything. That difference defines reliability. A fruit that degrades gracefully feeds you longer than one that swings between abundance and nothing based on a few missed conditions. Pears don't chase record harvests. They prioritize consistency. Year after year, even modest pear harvests add up to far more usable food than occasional bumper crops followed by failures. This steady output is why pears were valued in colder regions where food planning mattered. Reliability beats abundance when winter stretches long, and storage becomes more important than fresh harvests. Pear trees adapt well to a range of soils, including heavier and less than perfect ground. They don't demand constant correction or amendment. Their root systems establish steadily and support long-term stability. This makes pears suitable for marginal land where apples struggle. A fruit tree that accepts imperfect soil removes yet another failure point from the system, especially in older or neglected gardens. None of this makes pears glamorous. They don't dominate supermarket displays or social media gardens. But survival food rarely looks impressive. It works quietly season after season. Pears don't promise perfection. They promise presence. When conditions are harsh, that distinction matters more than flavor rankings or visual appeal. Peers already challenge the idea that apples are the gold standard for cold climates. But they're not the most extreme example. The next fruit tree goes even further. It doesn't just tolerate frost, it improves because of it. Cold doesn't reduce its value. It completes the process. And for many people, it remains one of the most misunderstood fruit trees in North America. American persimmons don't behave like most fruit. They are not damaged by frost. They are completed by it. The fruit is often inedible when picked early, harsh and astringent. But after cold exposure, the chemistry changes. Tannins break down. Sugars rise. What looks like failure before frost becomes food after it. This makes persimmon one of the few fruits where cold is not a risk, but a requirement. Most fruit trees try to finish before cold arrives. Persimmons wait for it. Hard frost triggers ripening instead of destruction. This reverses the usual winter problem. Instead of racing against cold, persimmons align with it. That timing removes pressure. Miss the perfect harvest day and nothing is lost. Cold doesn't punish delay. It rewards it. That single trait changes how reliable this fruit is in unstable climates. American persimmon trees tolerate temperatures that damage or kill many common orchard fruits. They grow in USDA zones where apples struggle and often survive winters that wipe out less adapted species. Once established, persimmons require very little protection. They don't rely on perfect shelter or constant care. Their cold tolerance is structural, not conditional. That makes them dependable in regions with unpredictable or severe winters. After harvest, persimmons store well when handled simply. They can be eaten fresh once softened, dried for long-term storage, or kept cool to slow ripening. Because they improve gradually, you don't face sudden spoilage. The fruit tells you when it's ready. This patience is rare. A fruit that waits instead of rotting is safer food, especially when winter stretches longer than expected. Persimmon trees require minimal pruning, little spraying, and tolerate neglect better than most fruit trees. Pests are fewer. Diseases are less aggressive. Skip a season, and the tree keeps going. This doesn't make persimmons perfect, but it makes them forgiving. And forgiveness is what keeps food systems alive when real life interrupts plans, schedules, and good intentions. If this way of thinking about food makes sense to you, this channel is built for that. Here, we focus on plants and systems that keep working when people are busy, tired, or dealing with real life. If you want more fruit, crops, and garden designs that survive cold, neglect, and missed seasons, subscribe now. Everything here is about building food systems that don't collapse when attention disappears. Persimmons don't depend on perfect timing. They don't punish delay. They don't collapse when conditions drift. Failure, when it happens, is gradual and partial. That's the opposite of apples, where one frost or mistake can erase an entire season. In survival terms, persimmons trade peak performance for stability. And stability feeds people far more reliably than perfection. Many people dismiss persimmons after tasting unripe fruit. That first experience creates a lasting misunderstanding. But that bitterness is not a flaw. It's a signal. It means the fruit isn't finished yet. Persimmons don't fit modern expectations of instant sweetness. They follow an older rhythm where waiting is part of eating. Once you understand that, the fruit stops disappointing and starts delivering. In cold regions, winter food must tolerate delay. Persimmons do exactly that. They hang late, they ripen slowly, they store without urgency. This aligns perfectly with winter realities, when time stretches and fresh harvests disappear. A fruit that bridges the gap between fall and deep winter removes pressure from the entire food system. Persimmons prove that apples are not the limit of cold, hardy fruit, but there are other trees built with similar patience. Some don't sweeten with frost, but they store so long that time itself becomes the tool. The next fruit is rarely eaten fresh at all. It was never meant to be. And that is exactly why it belongs in a failure-proof garden. Quince is rarely eaten fresh, and that is its strength. It was never bred for immediate sweetness or convenience. Quince is dense, firm, and built to last. Cold doesn't destroy it. Storage refines it. Harvested once, quince can be kept for months and transformed gradually into food through cooking and preservation. A fruit that expects time instead of fighting it is naturally suited for long winters and uncertain conditions. Quince trees tolerate cold well and require far less intervention than apples. They bloom later, avoiding some frost damage, and resist many common orchard diseases. Their needs are modest. Missed pruning or inconsistent care doesn't collapse the system. In survival terms, quince trades raw sweetness for structural reliability. It feeds slower, but it feeds longer, which matters more when fresh options disappear. Unlike fruit designed for quick sale, quince improves in storage. Aromas deepen, texture stabilizes, spoilage is slow and predictable. This allows deliberate use instead of rushed consumption. You don't fight the clock, you work with it. That shift removes stress from winter food planning and makes quince a dependable reserve rather than a fragile harvest that must be consumed immediately. Medlar looks strange by modern standards. It's harvested hard, unripe, and seemingly unusable. But medlar is meant to wait. Only after weeks of storage does it soften and become edible. Cold and time complete the fruit. This makes medlar uniquely suited to climates where immediate ripeness is risky. It turns patience into food, and winter into an ally instead of an enemy. Medlar doesn't spoil suddenly. It transitions slowly. Even when conditions aren't perfect, it rarely collapses all at once. That gradual change is a survival advantage. Instead of total loss, you get usable food over time. In failure-proof systems, slow decline is better than sudden ruin. Medlar embodies that principle better than almost any other fruit tree. Medlar trees demand little. They tolerate cold, uneven care, and imperfect soil. They don't require intensive spraying or constant shaping. This makes them quiet contributors rather than attention magnets. In gardens where time and energy fluctuate, that matters. A tree that stays productive without demanding precision removes yet another failure point from the system. Crab apples are not refined. They weren't bred for beauty or sweetness. They were shaped by survival. Smaller fruit, thicker skins, and higher acidity make them tougher than many modern apples. They withstand cold, pests, and neglect better than their domesticated relatives. While not ideal for fresh eating, they excel at storage, preservation, and steady use through winter. What crab apples lack in size, they make up for in reliability. Their fruit resists rot longer, and losses are usually partial, not total. Jelly, cider, and cooked preparations stretch their value across seasons. This isn't food built for presentation. It's food built to remain available when conditions are harsh and options are limited. Across pears, persimmons, quince, medlar, and crabapple, the same pattern appears. These fruits don't rush ripening. They tolerate cold. They store naturally. They forgive neglect. None of them chase perfection. They trade peak sweetness for durability. And that trade is exactly what allows them to keep feeding people when winter, fatigue, or failure disrupts normal routines. By now, it should be clear that apples aren't the standard of resilience we assume. They work well inside controlled systems, but they are not the most forgiving choice for cold, long storage, and real-life interruptions. The next step is understanding what this means for how we plant, store, and plan food. Because choosing the right fruit trees changes more than the orchard. It changes winter itself. When food stores naturally, winter becomes manageable. Fruits that wait instead of spoiling remove urgency from the system. You don't rush. You don't lose half your harvest overnight. Storage turns a single harvest into months of steady food. This is why cold, hardy, slow-ripening fruit matters more than high yields. It stretches time, and in winter, time is the most valuable resource you have. None of these fruits require advanced storage technology. A cool basement, cellar, garage, or unheated room is often enough. They don't need exact humidity or constant monitoring. Their biology does the work. Food that depends on precision fails when conditions drift. Food that tolerates variation survives. These fruits are designed for imperfect storage, just like real homes and real lives. Winter exposes weaknesses. It reveals which systems depend on constant inputs and which ones hold on quietly. Fruit trees that survive frost and store well reduce the number of decisions you must make when energy is low. They turn winter from a crisis into a season of use. That difference defines food security far more than summer abundance ever will. Most people plant fruit trees based on habit, not function. Apples feel familiar, so they get planted by default. But familiarity is not reliability. Cold climates punish assumptions. When winters stretch longer, mistakes become obvious. Choosing fruit trees that demand perfect care creates fragile systems. Choosing ones that forgive mistakes creates stability. That decision is made at planting time, not during harvest. A smaller orchard built around reliable fruit feeds better than a large one built around fragile crops. Fewer trees, chosen carefully, reduce labor and failure points. Instead of chasing variety, you build continuity. Each tree earns its place by surviving cold, storing well, and producing without constant attention. That's how gardens become systems instead of projects. Gardens don't fail because people stop caring. They fail because life intervenes. Illness, work, weather, and fatigue break routines. A failure-proof garden assumes this will happen. It chooses plants that continue working when attention drops. These fruit trees aren't special because they thrive under perfect care. They matter because they keep feeding you when care becomes inconsistent. Modern food systems prioritize speed. Survival systems prioritize patience. Fruits that improve in storage reverse the usual risk. Time becomes an ally instead of a threat. You gain control instead of reacting to spoilage. This shift changes how winter food is planned. Instead of preserving everything at once, you rely on food that waits quietly until you're ready. Better doesn't mean sweeter, larger, or more impressive. Better means more reliable. A better fruit tree feeds you more consistently, over longer periods with less effort. Apples can be excellent fruit, but they are not always the best survival fruit. Cold, hardy, slow-ripening trees redefine what better actually means when winter and failure are part of the equation. Across all 5 trees, the same traits repeat: cold tolerance, natural storage, forgiveness. None of them depend on perfect timing. None of them collapse suddenly. They degrade slowly, predictably, and usefully. That pattern is not accidental. It's the result of plants shaped by environments where winter, neglect, and uncertainty were normal, not exceptions. Apples became popular because they fit industrial systems. These fruits matter because they fit real life. They don't need constant care. They don't rush ripening. They don't punish mistakes immediately. They keep feeding people through cold, long storage and interrupted attention. That's why they deserve a place in gardens built for resilience, not perfection. If you want more food systems designed for real conditions, cold climates, limited time, and imperfect care, make sure you're subscribed. This channel focuses on plants and strategies that keep working when people get tired, busy, or overwhelmed. Everything here is about building gardens that survive winter, neglect, and failure without collapsing. The best fruit tree isn't the one that produces the most in perfect seasons. It's the one that still feeds you after frost, after delays, and after attention fades. In cold climates, reliability is the real harvest, and when winter arrives, the trees that wait are the ones that last.